Hey there, guys. I've got a new series here that I'm going to be starting on YouTube. And this new series, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on sort of the pipeline processes involved. What I mean by that, if that's not clear, is that kind of previously I've looked at things like software kind of quite individually. I've been looking through Studio Max, or I'd look at kind of the Unreal Engine or Quicksaw Mixer and kind of do tutorials for that. And some of the videos I will kind of then link it into the bits of software, but perhaps not as comprehensively as I intend to do in this series. So I say again, this is about a pipeline process and how we kind of move through the different bits of software, specifically those ones. We might make some nods along the way to things like Photoshop and maybe some other bits of software as well, but we'll just see how it goes. Ultimately, that will probably mean that these videos are a little bit longer than my usual ones because they're going to be a little bit more comprehensive, of course, because they'll involve different things. But again, we'll see how we go with that. Um, and obviously, any feedback from you guys is obviously really useful. All right, so in this video, I'm going to look at whiteboxing, sometimes referred to as grey boxing, which is a process used by level designers, sometimes by concept artists, maybe even like technical artists to sort of try things out with an environment, but mostly level designers. And it's a process where you can start to sort of mock up your environment, or sometimes referred to as pre-visualization, just to give the people working on a project an idea of what is what within the level. So I'm going to show you how you can do this quite simply in Unreal. To do this, I have downloaded a texture from online, from the World of Level Design website. This is a really good resource as well, guys, for looking at stuff. They've got some great tutorials, and yeah, they do some great stuff. But this video is actually about how to kind of create top-down level design maps. So if you're interested in that, obviously, give this a whirl. But I'm kind of just gonna nick their picture. I hope they don't mind too much about that. So I've downloaded that, and I'm going to import that into my level. So I'm just going to import over here, and I just find a texture and click open. And then what I'm going to do is if I drag this onto here, it will. Well, I'll show you. If I drag it onto here, does that not work? If I drag it on, it's not going to do anything from the looks of it, which is great. Okay. I'm not sure that's not doing that. Okay, well, what normally happens is that when you drag it onto like this, because this is a floor, this is taking this from an actual existing model, rather than it being kind of one of the in-house actors, it will multiply the texture across all of it, and we just want it to be one big massive texture. So I'm going to delete that out anyway. So just select it and press delete, and then I'm going to drag across a plane, and then just drop that onto there, and hopefully this time it will work. Okay, what is going on? Why is my texture not working? Let me save my map, see if it draft level. I don't know why that would make any difference, but yeah, it's being very strange. It's being very, very strange. Okay, well, I'll just do it the manual way then. I will just right click on here and go create material. Yeah, that's all working fine in there. Would you like to apply changes? I haven't made any I've moved the node slightly. There we go. So you're going to work now. Okay. How strange. Yeah, because obviously the whole kind of like wonderful thing there that I was going to show you was like that you can't obviously drag a texture onto a model. But what Unreal normally does is it will allow you then to, when you drag it onto it, like, I see what you're doing. You want to add this to here. You can't do that, but what I'll do is I'll convert it into a material for you and slap it on there for you. But it didn't do that for some reason, and I have no idea why. But yeah, anyway, not important. It's where it's what we want. It's in the state that we want it, so it's all good. So I'm just going to knock that down to the z-axis on 0, just so it's on the floor. And then I will just change the scale of that as well. So I'll go 100 on the X and then 100 on the Y. Don't need to change the Z, of course. And that's fine. So obviously if I sort of zoom out here, so you can kind of see what's going on. Obviously, what we're trying to do is we're just making like, this is going to be essentially our blueprint, or our kind of our foundation for which we're going to start to build some of the kind of the objects on top of. Okay. Um, so just in case you need it, guys, I'm just in terms of navigation, I'm using my right mouse. I'm clicking and holding that, and that's allowing me to sort of move around and look around at everything. And then I'm using my arrow keys to sort of move backwards and forwards and left and right, and whichever direction I'm sort of pointing my camera at, I can then, if I press forward, it will move in that direction. So yeah, same shortcut keys as FreeStudio Max. So WER, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. And you can see as well that's changing up here, so you can click them manually up there if you wanted to. The orange, the highlighted orange sections mean that by, this happens by default as well when you come into Unreal. They are set to snaps. So that one is currently set to a snap of 10, which means that if I move anything, it will snap to 10. The values within Unreal as well are set to centimeters, or obviously degrees in the case of rotation. And then I don't really know what we call the measurement for the scale. I don't think obviously it's not something you can attribute to it necessarily. It's just, I suppose it's just, perhaps it's a percentage. Perhaps that's probably the most clearest way to explain that. Yeah, it'd be a percentage, wouldn't it? So 0.5, and you can change these, or you can turn these off. And then they won't snap. You can just move them freely around. So, but yeah, just a couple of tips on that one before we move forward. And we'll probably look at those again as when it becomes relevant to what we're working on. Okay, so I'm just going to click Save All down here because I've got some stars next to here, and that simply means that when we're using computationally expensive software like Unreal, sometimes it'll crash. Sometimes we'll have problems with it, and so ultimately, if it's got stars over it, that's pretty much saying to you, if this crashes now, they're not going to be there. They're not going to be there when you reopen this project. So by clicking on Save All and no stars, it means that they are now committed and saved to the project, which is awesome. Okay, so let's look at some whiteboxing. Let's do this bit over here, yeah. All right, so we could use some of these actors just here, okay? But we have much less functionality in terms of what we might want to achieve with using these as opposed to looking at geometry. So if I pull in the box from this geometry bit just here, you can see that in the details panel just down here, I've got some different options that are associated with that. So X, Y, and Z. If I just quickly go back and drag in a cube from here, you can see that I don't have those options to manipulate the X, Y, and Z. I just have the scale options just here. Okay, so that straight away is a bonus for why we might want to use this instead. Get my words out. And so rather than scaling it, I'm just going to adjust it in this bit here. So if I'm looking at, I want to move it from this point and this point. So this is the red, so this is the x-axis. So let's just scale this up. And I can just type a value in here. So I could be like, okay, well that looks kind of roughly like it's going to be 1,000. So I can just type in 1,000, hit enter. Or what you can do is you can hover over the area and click and drag, which is something that I prefer to do, just because you can kind of play around with this much quicker and just eyeball it in terms of roughly the right size. Okay, and then once you've roughly got the right size, a good sort of practice, a good sort of technique to get used to is making sure that you always round those numbers off to the nearest 20. So in that case, I'm going to go 1180. And then this one here, I'll go 1320, like that. Okay. Also worth noting as well that the pivot point for the actual object is bang in the center of the cube, which means that when you adjust these values, it will always stretch out in both directions. So when I've expanded the size of it on the X, not only has it moved in this direction, but it's also moved in that direction, and that's to do with the fact that the pivot point is in the middle. If the pivot point was on the edge of the cube there, then it would only extend out in that direction. Those people that have used 3D Studio Max a little bit will perhaps have a better idea of why that's important to make reference to. But again, if it becomes relevant as we go through it in terms of some other reasons, then I'll sort of allude to that. So if I hit play at the moment, then, oh, that was loud, and come over here, you can see that the height, that's kind of the default height for that geometry box that's come in, is roughly about the right height for us to move through. So that's probably going to be like the height of a door that we put in the level. Okay, so that'll give you a good idea in terms of making sure that your sizes are relevant to the characters that you might have in it, that kind of thing. So if that's the door height, what I'll do is I'll come up an extra 100 for the sake of, well, that'll be the ceiling, because there'll be obviously a gap between the top of the door and where the ceiling is. And then I want my building to be, I'll go 2 stories, so be 300 for a whole story, and then 600 for 2. So yeah, so I want 2 levels. And again, because the pivot point is in the middle, if I select this, you can see that that has extended upwards, but it's also extended downwards. So I just need to lift that up, and I could try and kind of line this up perfectly, and that would be fine. But a nice sort of tip is if you lift up into, above the object that you want it to kind of snap flush with, and then just press the end key on your computer, on your keyboard, sorry, and that will just snap it back down to this, like, flush with the surface just below it, like so, which is awesome. Cool. So if I come in now, and I'm just going to turn the volume down on my computer because that's quite loud. There we go. Fine, yep, so that would be our door, and then, yep, 2 stories. Perfect, cool. You might notice as well as I'm going through this, I'm just thinking of other things to help you in terms of using this. It might just be myself, but you've got this thing like where the brightness adjusts, and there's 2 places to affect this. So the first place is if you go into, click on Show, and down to Post-Processing. You'll notice that there's this option here called Eye Adaptation. And this simply refers to the fact that the lighting on the level tries to change so that it sees things. You see things in the way that it thinks you intend to see it. And that can be very, very useful, especially when you're playing the game, to make sure that your player can see everything and the lighting levels are kind of adjusted accordingly. But I actually find it quite annoying whilst I'm kind of editing and stuff. So I tend to turn it off. So I go there. And another thing as well that I found out recently, so see for example these little icons just here, you can see these, and there's a way of turning these off where you just press G. You press G in the level. But as soon as you do that, the eye adaptation comes back for that bit. So it's like eye adaptation works for when your icons are on and off. So when you've got them switched off, you just need to go into Show again, Post-Processing, and just untick eye adaptation. That one caught me out, a couple of times. I was like, why am I still seeing, changes in the light and stuff? And there is a way as well that you can go into first-person blueprints, and I'll just open it up there. And if you go to the camera and down to, I think it's lens, and exposure, you've got this minimum brightness and max brightness setting here. And if I just hover over that for a second, so the auto exposure minimum adaptation is disabled if min equals max. Okay, so that's exactly the same thing that's in there. So if I go into here and I just set those both to be like 3 and 3 with those both ticked, as it says, if they equal each other, then eye adaptation will be cancelled out, which is really cool for what we're doing anyway. So let me just hit play, and now no matter where I look, no matter what lights are in the scene, it will not change from that. It will always be consistently that. Okay, which again for us is fine because we're just kind of messing around with this draft stuff in terms of the whiteboxing. But with a full level, you might want to turn that back on. But certainly for when you're kind of editing and testing things out, it's good to know that that's where those things can be turned off, if that's useful to you. Okie dokie. All right, so we've got our first bit just here. So what I'll do is I'm going to duplicate this. The duplicate key in Unreal is Alt, so that might throw again a couple of people that are used to using 3ds Studio Max because the duplicate key for that is Shift. But if we hold down Alt and drag that out like that, then we get an exact replica, of course, of the previous one. And we can do it this way, or we could go back to geometry and give a drag another box in. That's fine. But I'll just do it this way for the time being. So I'll put that there, and what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to get this bit just here. And you can see that I'm not trying to be absolutely spot on perfect with these kind of models, this geometry that I'm putting in here. I could obviously really refine these and be like, right, well, that needs to be rotated ever so slightly, a couple of degrees this way. And if you want to do that, you can do that. But again, whiteboxing is very much about just kind of blocking it out initially, just to give that idea. So it doesn't have to be spot on. As long as it's roughly within the realms of where your sketches are, then it should be fine. So let's take this, and what we'll do is I will reduce the size there on that bit, and then I'm going to reduce the size on that bit as well, like so. I'm going to keep it the same height, so just going to come forward there and bring that right down. That's going to work. Maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. So, just realised I didn't have I pressed G, hadn't I, before to turn the icons off, so I couldn't see when I was doing that what it was actually spacing it out to. So just make sure you're pressing that G again to there. So that's roughly about the right dimensions. Again, I don't want to spend too long kind of refining it if I don't need to. So I'll just, again, nearest 20, so 500 and 460. Like so. And the reason why I am doing it to the nearest 20 as well, guys, is because if I am wanting to put things next to each other, I want this to be flush next to this bit of geometry. And simply the reason I'm doing that is because my default snaps are set to 10, and that's, as I say, those are the defaults when you come into Unreal. 10's a good size to work with. So you might be thinking, or you might be saying to yourself, well, in that case, if it's snapping to 10 degrees, then why am I not just making this to the nearest 10? Well, I wish I was a little bit brainier when it came to the maths, but I think probably the easiest way for me to explain it is that if you've got two objects that are next to each other, they won't perfectly snap next to each other when they're set to so if I change this value here to like 510, and this one then had like values of like 1170 or 1330 just there kind of thing. I think kind of the way it works is that because you're putting two objects next to each other, it's almost like this idea of you splitting it down the middle. So 1180. So what would half of? So yeah, if it was 510, half of that would be 255. Yeah. And that is why I think when we try and put these objects next to each other, in fact, I'll show you. I'll try and demonstrate it. So I'll change this to 510, just there, like so. And so what should happen is that these objects will snap together. So I'm just trying to move my camera so I can get those in a slightly better position. Oh, it won't impact as much on that one actually. So because I need to be on the Y, don't I? So let me do 470. So nearest 10, 470. And then what I'll do is I'll put these next to each other. And so what should happen is they should snap next to each other. But you can see, hopefully, that when I'm dragging that, it's going across, it's cutting in. And each one of these little, grey and then really dark grey squares represent 10 or 10 centimeters. So I know straight away that because that's overlapping there, that's overlapping by 5. And I think it's literally just to do with that, again, trying to get into your heads the idea that half of 470 would be 235. And so that's why it is overlapping by 5. I could resolve this quite simply by changing the snaps to 5 degrees, and then it wouldn't be an issue. I could then keep it at, kind of a multiple of 10 just here. But because I want to keep it of multiples of 10 up here on the snaps, I find just when I'm moving around it that it's much easier just to keep it where it's multiples of 20, so that these will then snap next to each other perfectly. Okay, cool. Yeah, again, apologies, I am not fantastic on the maths, but I'm just kind of showing you the tried and tested methods that I have used to kind of approach this, to get those things to make sure that they are nice and flush next to each other, and that's worked. Cool. Okay, so that's blocks. That's nice and easy. Let's look at some of the other geometry. So we've got curved stairs. So you might want to be, giving your player the option to kind of move to the top of the building. You could have linear stairs or spiral stairs, or we've got curved stairs here. So, so I want them to curve the opposite direction. So I'll go down into the settings for this one, and then we can click on counterclockwise instead. And then I'll just hit E on the keyboard to rotate, and it will rotate that 90 degrees. So at the moment, each step on here has a height of 20, and there are 10 steps. So we've got lots of other measurements, but ultimately those are the ones that we're interested in at the moment. So 10 times 20 will obviously be 200, which is actually the default initial height of our box, if you remember. We've changed this to 600, so I'm obviously going to need to change something on there. I could change the step height, or I could change the number of steps. I think for this, I'll just change the number of steps. So it's 30 times 20. Yeah, so obviously 3 times 2, 6, and then you get the 2 zeros, you get the 600. And then I'll just move that into place over here, like so. It's very steep, and I'm not entirely convinced. I'll try it. I'm not entirely convinced that the player will be able to move up those anyway. So, oh yeah, well, I'm very surprised by that. There is, something written. There is some code written into the players that they are able to move a certain amount upwards when greeted with things like stairs. And I just thought that would be too steep. What I'm going to do anyway, even if it's not too steep, kind of for the player to come up to, visually it looks a little bit too steep. So I'm going to just change that to 400 instead, just to make that so it doesn't look quite as intense. There we go. And then just snap that onto the edge like that. Perfect, cool. So now when I hit play, and move across, there we go, that's a little more natural. Cool, okay. Yeah, so that's what we can do with stairs. Now in the case of going back to a box for a second, if I come back to here, you may have noticed that whilst we're going through these options, we had this option here called additive in terms of the brush type. We can change this to be subtractive, which means that I can then move that into this space just here, like that. And you can see that actually creates then a hole. I feel like at this point, I need to say that it does slightly bother me that in order to kind of actually move your character around properly, you have to left click, and obviously that will then fire off a shot. So I shouldn't let it bother me that much, but one day I will find a way to make that stop that from doing that. But yeah, as you can see, when you put the geometry cube in there and you set it to subtractive, it will allow you to not only create the hole, but it changes the collision on the object as well, so you can actually go into the hole, which is really cool. We can actually select this as well, just here. And another one of the options that you may have noticed is that you have this option here to click on hollow. And when you do that, you can now see that where we've cut this hole into it, you can see actually inside that it is completely hollow, which is awesome. And we can change the thickness of those walls as well. So if we change them to 50, it will change it by 25. Again, I'm not quite sure why when changing the wall thickness that would only reduce it, but basically it does half the amount you put it into. So if I type in 60, you can see again that each one of these represents 10. So that's 10, 20, 30. So I'm not sure again of the maths of why that does that. If anyone does know, feel free to pop a comment in the video if you like to, but I'm certainly not sure why it's set up like that. Again, not brilliant on the maths with that stuff. So yeah, that's how you can do that, and then we'll probably then, on that basis, then come down here, and we'll put another one in there. So we will go subtractive again, and I guess what we'll do is we'll try and make a bit of a step with this. So if there's going to be a step, we need to be a little bit higher than 200. So we'll go 200 and 250. And then if I just bring that up and then press end to make that flush to the floor, and bring that inwards like that. Looks quite wide, so let me see if I can just change that. Was 100 okay? That looks way too thin now, doesn't it? 150. Let's make it like 160, so it's, again, sticking to that idea of multiple of 20. Let's see if that works. So if I hit play, can I get in there? Yeah, perfect, cool. All right, so that's like the basics of whiteboxing in terms of creating the geometry. So, you know, not too difficult, not too comprehensive, and what you would essentially do is you would start there, and then you would kind of just keep adding different things to these sections here. You know, it looks like we've got a main building in the middle just here, which is cool, and so on and so forth. So what I did want to also show, which can be quite useful, and I've got the starter content that I've added into this project when I brought it in. So that's going to allow me to add some different materials in here, which is quite useful. If you haven't got starter content in here, but you've got it in another project, let me show you a quick tip for doing that. So what you would do in the other project, you would simply go to where starter content is, right click on the folder, and click on where it says migrate. Let me just save that first, and it will show you all the different things that you'll migrate across into your different level. You click OK, and then what it will ask you to do is to actually look for this project, you know, so this whiteboxing project that we've set up, and you just need to put it inside the content folder. Okay, that's just for those people that didn't automatically have starter content in the level at the start. And it would just mean that you don't have to kind of like go ahead and create a whole brand new project, you know, just for this whiteboxing stuff. So yeah, so I've got the starter content in there. So what we can do, we can start thinking about adding some stuff to here. So if I go into starter content and go to the materials folder, we can start adding some bits and bobs to this. So let's brick clay, let's add that to this one just here, and then we'll add it to that bit just there as well. And then maybe for the roof, I'll add like a concrete grime. That might be quite nice. Okay. And so you might see here, there's like a little bit of a difference because it's on a different model, a different set of geometry. One of the cool things you can do is you can align these things. So if you select that and you go to geometry alignment, and you've got different options. So if we say that, obviously it's not the floor, it's the ceiling, but if we just select floor, and then we go to this one here and do the same, we go there and select floor, what we should have now is that these should, in theory, line up with each other a lot better. There we go, perfect, because it's using that as a basis for understanding how much it's supposed to space it out. I think this one looks like it's all right, but we'll just set it up anyway. So alignment, wall, alignment, wall, and from that you can see again that that's obviously the join difference, but you can see that that's going flush across there, which is really cool. Okay, so that's another really cool thing that we can do with the geometry, which is nice. And then say on this wall here, I will use, I've got new one there, but if I put old one on the side there, that's pretty cool. Okay, and then stairs are a little bit more interesting. You can literally change the material for each one of the steps. You can apply material to all of it if it's all going to be the same kind of material, which is fine. but it's the same with these bits as well. You can add like different ones in here. So that can be a little bit of a pain in terms of applying that if you know that you're going to have different materials. You might have like, I don't know, gold going up on like the kind of the bit that's pointing up just there, and then you've got the flat bit just there. That might be like some kind of velvet carpet thing. Probably not for if it's outside, of course. I mean, these might all just be metal. But yeah. So one of the things that I also wanted to kind of allude to on this is, and again, this is going to be useful for those people that perhaps have looked at 3D Studio Max before and have a little bit of an idea of how we do things in 3D Studio Max. So, but I've just set this up very basically. So, in 3D Studio Max, if I quickly create a cube, what I'm going to show you here is essentially the way that materials that are created inside of things like 3D Studio Max come into Unreal, just so that you can kind of see how that transitions through. So I'll just create a simple box, 50 by 50 by 50, it's fine. And then I would just quickly turn it into a poly. Just make sure that's at the center of the origin point, center of the universe. And then what I will do is I will apply some different, so I'll select those two and I'll make sure they have an ID of, lost it, there you go, of 1. Then I'll make these have an ID of 2. And then this one and this one will have an ID of 3. And then I just need to set that up in terms of the materials. So I'll just press M on the keyboard and I'll just drag this onto here. Change the type to a multi-sub. That's fine. And then I just need 3. So I'll just delete all those ones. And then just for ease, I'll just copy these quickly across like that. So I'm not faffing. Go into here, just change the color of that to, I don't know, like a blue. Obviously, it doesn't matter. I'm just quickly putting this together so I can show you what goes on once this drops into Unreal. So yeah, as you can see, I've now got a cube, and because I've got one material on the whole thing, but it's a multi-sub, which means that I can specify which surface has which different material on. Okay. So if I ran through that really quickly. If you want to see that in a little bit more detail, there are some videos available on this channel for multi-subs and how we do that. But again, I don't want to spend too much time here because I'm just literally wanting to show you this because I want you to see how it translates across into Unreal. So export that, put it on the desktop, just call it a cube. Yeah, that's fine. Smooth groups, that's all good. Click OK. I can close that down now. Don't need 3D Studio Max anymore. And then I'll come back to Unreal. So let me just quickly import that in and show you how this is working. So cube, and I don't want to create any materials. It's going to sound crazy, but I don't need it to actually bring in that stuff that I just set up. So I'll just import all, because the only point that I'm trying to make here really is that when I do that and you double click and open this up, you now see that it has 3 different material slots. And we can put anything on there we want to. We can put, I could put gold on that one. I could put chrome on that one. I could put stone on that one, for example. And that's all been made possible because inside of 3D Studio Max, I set up that multi-sub when I exported it as an FBX. And it understands now that this cube has 3 different materials that are associated with it, and the position where those materials are where we set the IDs. Okay. So that's multi-sub in a nutshell, okay? The importance of me showing you that might feel like I've gone off on a massive tangent, but I promise it will make sense. The importance of me showing you that is because we have different materials set up on this geometry here, okay? So we've got this concrete one up here, we've got this new brick, I think it was called, we've got this old brick here, and we've even got the original kind of grey, sort of dark grey checkered material that's still classed as a material. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because in theory, again, putting your kind of your level design hat on again, You might be like, well, I don't know what the materials are going to be yet. I haven't got the materials because I'm still very much at the stage of where I'm experimenting with things. And that's fine. But what you might want to do is you might go, well, I know that the outside of this is going to be different from the side of it. I know that the floor section here is obviously going to be different from the walls there, for example. So what you might want to do is you might want to put placeholder textures in there, placeholder material, sorry, on there. So that when you've got those in place, it doesn't matter what materials you use. What's important is that you've specified in Unreal that they are different from each other. So that when you kind of come to refining this in a little bit more detail, that that is available. So there's different ways that we can approach this. If this could be like something that you are showing, your bosses, say in a company, and you're like, here it is, here's the basics, and I've slapped on some different materials in the different areas, which will be placeholders, or I put those on initially just so that I could see that they were different from each other. I then spent some time going into like Substance Painter or Quixel and made those textures. Here you are, and this is what it looks like, just to give you a bit of a pre-visualization idea. Okay, you might take it further than that. You might take it in terms of you actually want to use this. So you're kind of, now you've roughly got the dimensions for the building. You're like, well, this is great, but I need to refine it a little bit more. I need to make sure that I put some kind of around this door. I'm going to put a frame around it, that kind of thing. And I'm actually going to model that in 3D Studio Max. And so what you might do is you might select these objects. So if I just hold down Control and select them, and you can select them in the viewport, or you can select them in the world outliner just up here, making sure I've selected all of them. So I've, even though this is the subtractive one that's taking away from it, I still need to select it, and I still need to select that one as well if I want a hole in the ceiling, like so. And then with all those selected, if I come down here into the options, sometimes this is hidden. I'll just show you. It's in the brush settings section. So come down here, and what we're looking at doing is we're going to create a static mesh. So again, those of you that are fairly new to Unreal, what is a static mesh? A static mesh is a model. It's a 3D model. Unreal's terminology is static mesh or skeletal mesh. If it's static mesh, it doesn't have any animation associated with it. If it's a skeletal mesh, it does have animation associated with it, and not in the traditional sense of like it must have, it must be a character. That's why it's a skeletal mesh. It can be any object, any 3D model that spins or has something about it that's animated, and as soon as that has animation associated with it, it will be classed as a skeletal mesh. Okay, so that's what Create Static Mesh is doing right here. So, I mean, for some people, it might be like, well, I thought normal pipelines where you would model the bits and bobs in sort of 3D Studio Max or Maya or Blender or whatever, and then you put the things inside Unreal afterwards. Well, that's why whiteboxing is slightly different, because again, you've got a couple of different options about how you play around with that. And what some people will do is they will, as I've explained, they will kind of create the foundations, they'll create the basic look of the models within the scene, and then once they're happy with it, then they will go like, right, I want to refine this more. I want to refine it, and I'm going to refine it in 3D Studio Max or Maya or Blender, whatever 3D modeling software you guys are using. So in order to do that, we then need to convert this to, actually, this we want to say we don't want you to be geometry anymore within the level. We need you to be static mesh so that I can export you out of Unreal and put you into my modeling software. And this option is only available because Unreal knows that everything we've got selected is geometry. As soon as I select something like light source as well, that option disappears. So it's only available for that reason. So I'm going to hit on Create Static Mesh, and it's going to say, yeah, of course, that's fine. Where do you want to put it? I'll put it in my whiteboxing folder, and I'll just call it building 1, say for example, and then Create Static Mesh. Cool. And then it's just there for us. Okay. It's automatically changed this as well, so it's kind of updated the scene, and you can see that actually there. So all my geometry's disappeared now, and it's just got this here. This symbol here means static mesh, and it also tells me it's a static mesh active just there. So it's updated the assets actually in the scene, which is cool. And this is now, I can right click on this and I can go to Asset Actions. I can export this, and I can export it as an FBX file. on my computer, which means that I can open up in things again like Free Studio Max or Maya, etc. Which is cool. But the other bit that I wanted to allude to, which was the whole point of me showing you that bit with me importing the cube earlier, was that now, even though this is a static mesh, check it out. I've got my materials, and this can be as many or as few as you want. I've got 4 material slots, and they're not just any 4 random material slots. Not only has it set it up in perhaps a much more simplistic way than if I was setting up material IDs and multi-subs inside of 3D Studio Max, but it has also made sure that these are in the specific points. So if I highlight where that is, it doesn't work. Isolate then, there we go, cool. So if I isolate that section, it shows you everything that has that material associated with it, okay? Same with these bits, so again, highlight's not working, not really sure why. It's supposed to show up in yellow, but it's not doing. Fair enough. So they'll isolate that section again that's associated with that, and so on and so forth. There you go. Cool. So that's a nice sort of maybe a more simplistic way of setting up different materials for an object if you prefer to do it that way. Okay. Another thing whilst I'm in here as well, in fact I'll just show you, is if now, because I've turned this into a static mesh, by default it doesn't have any collision associated with it. So I can just simply walk through the walls, okay, because there's no collision when you convert it into a static mesh. So you just want to make sure that you go into the static mesh, scroll all the way down to collision, and we can sort of manually add some collision points to this, but just it's a little bit easier. Some people that know Unreal really well will be kind of grimacing at me a little bit and being like, you shouldn't really be doing that. Use complex collision as simple, because that uses that's kind of a computationally expensive algorithm, process that we're trying to get Unreal to do by telling it to do that. So yeah. Ideally you want to do it like where you actually have it, where you have different blocks going around it, and in a more specified way. But if we do that, it means that we wouldn't be able to walk through the front door. So, yeah, I'm just kind of doing it for ease at the moment. And then I think I'll go collision. There you go. It will show you the collision that's on there, so you can see it's wrapped around the door and on the inside as well. So, yeah, coolio. So that's saved, close that down, and then yeah, just check that does work. It should work fine, but yeah. And there we go. So you can go in there, or if you wanted to, you can go through here, up the stairs, through the hole, like so. And that is the basics of whiteboxing, with some perhaps some more comprehensive tips on adding materials, having different material slots set up, as opposed to setting those different material IDs in 3D Studio Max. How we can then convert this to a static mesh, so that you can then export it and put it into software like 3D Studio Max to refine it, add more detail to it, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful. As I said, this is the first kind of episode in this series, so stay tuned, because obviously we'll be looking at stuff in even more detail, and just adding things to turn you guys into game designers and level designers. Awesomeness. Okay, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.